Tim Prister with John Brice. This is Irish Illustrated's Instant Analysis. Notre Dame just concluded their 9th practice of the preseason. They scrimmaged on Friday, JB. It's Sunday, August 10th. It was for us, interview-wise, we'll jump to the field, of course. Our interview-wise, it was a linebacker wide receiver day. We'll get more into that here in a second. But, JB, you were on the offensive side of the football today. What'd you see?
You know, I saw a lot of detail work for the quarterbacks. I saw Kenny Minchey, and I think this was touched on in the practice report, but in between drills, I watched him work his footwork all the way across the field. I found it interesting. Like, the guys are jogging to the next station, and it was 20, 30-yard maneuver, and Kenny Minchey just kept his footwork and rotating his hips the entire time. Again, just stealing reps, as I like to call it, like making sure there's no wasted moments on the practice field. We got to see a little live action, but it was the third team offense on the third team defense. The most notable thing is just James Flanagan's physical. And he showed on a couple of inside runs that he wasn't afraid to stick his nose in there. Ball got put on the ground. He was among the first to dive after it. Just really fearless. I thought I noticed the kickers in early warm-ups as well. While we were watching stretch, they were kicking field goals behind because Notre Dame worked on its outside practice field, easternmost one on campus along Twickenham Drive. And I saw good strikes from Noah Burnett and Eric Schmidt. No, they were not perfect. They didn't hit 100% of their kicks, but Schmidt really packs punch with his, and it was impressive to see. I just noticed today, we've heard so much about his leg strength. I thought today was one of the times that it was more notable for us because we were outside. He was under the sunshine. There was no roof for him to have to kick and worry about, and he really booted the ball.
I saw one of those, and I wasn't even looking for him, but I kind of turned in that direction, didn't know who kicked it, and the ball really came off his foot, and it was Eric Schmidt. As it relates to James Flanagan at the end of practice, you know how the offensive line will come inside and they do additional stuff. I swear the offensive line practices more than everybody else, and James Flanagan was one of the attached tight ends. Helmets are off. Yeah. Because they've had a tough workout outside. It's warm and humid, a little bit breezy, but James Flanagan working inside.
Yeah, let me just throw out there also, not a good day early for the offensive line. No. Joe Rudolph is one of the more engaging interviews that we ever have. He was demonstratively upset today. And
from the very beginning.
Right from the very beginning, called somebody spaghetti for a weak block, said their arms were just noodles, basically. But, Tim, I know you got to focus a little bit more on defense, particularly in the interviews. We won't get there yet, but I did want to ask what you saw out of the defense today.
Yeah, I mean, I think we got an idea who's right end, left end. That's the new. They used to be Viper and strong side end, but now if you're a right end, you have to play on the boundary or to the field side. And you know, and again, that was explained that Notre Dame has defensive ends now that are versatile enough to do that. So at right end today was Josh Burnham, Brice Young, Kobe Onwuke, the walk-on, who is back on the roster, and Joe Reif, the freshman. At left end was Boubacar Traore coming out with the ones, Junior Tui Alamak and Logan Thomas, and, of course, converted linebacker Preston Zinner. So a little bit of alignment there. Speaking of salty, Chris Ash was quite salty as well. They scrimmaged on Friday. They had Saturday off, so they're back on the field. It's been 48 hours since they've actually been on the field with them. And the instruction was pointed today.
Yeah, and worth noting, I think they were in shells today, not full pads, because Friday's action was full pads and it was very intense. I think, as you noted, today was practice number 9, so they're past all the acclimation periods. They're able to go full pads, but because the length of Friday's scrimmage and the physicality, they come back today after a day of recovery, just go in shells. They've got several days of practice in a row coming up, another scrimmage, I think, set for later this week. And I do think of note, they had college officials on Friday night for that. I mean, they're starting to put it into more and more game-like situations, and it was a crew, from my understanding, that has ACC experience. So just a little detail there that I think is worth mentioning.
As I mentioned, we had interviews with the linebackers coach, Max Bullough, Mike Brown, the receivers coach, and respective players at those positions. Mike Brown, he was asked about Elijah Burris right away, and he just talked about that he's super talented. He's a guy that can really, influence Notre Dame's passing game this year. I asked about Malachi Fields. The first thing Mike Brown said about him was leadership. You love to hear that, a guy that's 6'4", 225. And he said, he is a wideout that can help take the pressure off the running game, is the way that he put it. And then playing on at the boundary receiver is also Michael Gilbert and Cam Williams. And then Max Bull is always entertaining, but he talked about, it's a 4-man rotation, and we know who those guys are. Of course, Bowen, Snead, Villasu, Ama, and Osbury. The fifth in that is Maiden Framo, and he's not quite there yet, but Bullough said by the end of the season, mid-season, moving on, he's a guy that will know everything that he needs to go to get on the field. And like you said, if you play well and execute, you're going to play. And we saw that last year with a 5-man rotation.
And to Madden's credit, we heard Drake Bowen, one of the final answers of the day, talk about how Madden is the guy right now trying to be the biggest sponge. He praised those younger linebackers throughout the unit, but he said specifically because Madden's only been here since January or late December, whatever it is, that he has been the one who's been most intentional about trying to soak up everything. I thought that was obviously very encouraging. Again, it's a byproduct of the great culture that Notre Dame has. And then another thing of note with Drake Bowen is we heard Max Bullough say, and we heard, I think, Jalen Snead say, he really has asserted himself as a leader, and he's the guy who's now unafraid to tell his teammates, hey, there's too much trash on the locker room floor, pick it up. Like, we don't keep it like that. So Drake Bowen taking that next big step that we've been talking about since January.
No doubt.
I'll continue to refer to him in that dejected national championship locker room, him talking to me about he's not going to wait. The time for leadership is now, and he's been stepping up since that time.
Yeah, I think he'll be a captain. He'll be one of the guys that puts his name in for captainship, and we'll see what happens there. I do know it's pronounced Viliamu Asa. But I thought it was interesting that Bowen, you mentioned about keeping the locker room clean, but he said he's following the lead of guys before him, J.D. Bertrand, Jack Kaiser, and so, he's taking that responsibility very seriously. I thought it was interesting that Bowen is saying, I learned from Viliamu Asa, at least as it relates to outside pass rush, because it comes very, very naturally for KVA. And so they're trying to get Bowen involved in that a little. And I did have an opportunity to talk to Malachi Fields. Very impressive to see that young man in person, 6'4", 225. He was impressed. Obviously, he's gone against Leonard more than a few times. Man, you want to talk about big on big. That's a great matchup there. And Malachi Fields still professes that the disputed catch with Virginia last year here in Notre Dame Stadium was ruled a catch by the official, so he thought the official made the right call. I don't think there's a single Notre Dame fan that thinks he caught that pass.
No, but I appreciate him sticking to his guns, so to speak, and refusing to let it go. Hey, that's part of his career stats at Virginia, so I would hang on to that as well, even if we all know that the ACC officials blew that call. So, and speaking of with the wide receivers and a couple of more nuggets, I personally visited some with Jordan Faison and Will Pauling. Jordan Faison talking about leaning into the versatility. It's something he takes pride in. He wants that. They want it in the group. He talked about his improved strength helping him for sure this year, and he was very complimentary of Will Pauling as the guy that they can't get out of the goog. And so I was able to follow up and ask Will Pauling about this. We already heard on day one of preseason camp Marcus Freeman call him a dog and say that he's got that dog mentality and really praise the way he practices. Turns out though his nickname, TP, is Goog Rat, because he's been known to actually spend the night in the goog. He's friendly with the janitors and the custodians. He's in there at all hours of the night. Mike Brown acknowledged to me, yes, there have been a couple of times that Will Pauling has beaten the coaches into the goog.
My goodness.
Especially if he spent the night. He's got a little bit of an advantage on beating people inside.
He did. We heard, though, he did take a pretty good shot in Friday's scrimmage.
He did, and I asked him about that, and he said, yes, it was a seam route. Kenny Minchie put the ball on the money. It was probably going to be a touchdown. Adon Schuler absolutely detonated the play and let Will Pauling know about it. He told me that Adon Schuler is a very gifted trash talker. And I said, how do you respond to that? Do you ignore it? Do you chirp back? And he goes, I pretty much just let my play do the talking. And he goes, it wasn't Adon Schuler. I'm not going to tell you who it was, but I got my revenge a few minutes later on another play when I blocked somebody onto his backside. One more quick thing about Mike Brown that I think is of note. He said, look, last year there were times because guys earned it that he played 8 wide receivers in a game, but he wants a 6 wide receiver rotation. He made that clear. They're at a 6 wide receiver rotation optimally going into this year. He thinks they're closer to having an offensive identity, and he was, in addition to those veterans, complimentary of Micah Gilbert.
For more on today's practice and our interviews, go to irishillustrated.com. We have practice reports. And we have a podcast on Monday, per usual, Irish Illustrated Insider. Until then, Tim Prister with John Brice. This has been Irish Illustrated's Instant Analysis.